Okay. Right. Hopefully this is working. Good to be here. Nice to see you joining. And hopefully this is working today on Facebook too, because I've tried Facebook many times and it's just not worked. So I'm hoping that today it will work well for me on all three groups. Fingers crossed. Hi everyone joining. Hello. So happy Mother Language Day to you all. Today is the International Mother Language Day that was set up, I believe, 5 years ago. And as we sort of talk about languages and language learning, I wanted to sort of talk to you a little bit about what that means and what it means to me about Mother Language Day. It's an interesting sort of day to celebrate because I think, obviously, mother language means different things to different people. And hello, everyone. Yes, salam. Hello, hola. For me personally, I was asked about this, but what I would be able to write about Mother Language Day. I'm very glad you're proud of Bengali, and it is in fact, I think, because of Bengali and Bangladesh that this day was set up originally. It was so that the origin was for sort of this, the ability for people in Bangladesh to make Bengali their national language, their mother tongue is their national language, and not Urdu. And I'm pleased that people have the right to have their mother language acknowledged. So I think it's extremely important for us psychologically to feel that our languages and our cultures are valued, and that sometimes there isn't a national idea of a language and a culture that sort of we fit into as well. And strange as it seems, this idea of nations and is in human history fairly new, I guess. I mean, there were kingdoms and there were people that took over certain areas and things throughout history. But these sort of ideas of these fixed borders and passports, and we travel and we're all foreigners in different places. I mean, people have been mixing for a long time, and also speaking different languages for trade, and because we live under certain rules or whatever, we've learned different languages throughout the centuries, right? But our mother language is important because it's what we learned from our, well, I guess as the name goes, mothers, or our direct families. So one a banana man. Colonization and sort of dominance of certain languages has led to some mother languages not being as widely spoken, people feeling marginalized. And today I wanted to share with you my own family history, and because when I was asked about how I felt about this day and what I would talk about, my mother tongue is English, but that actually by right should not be the case. In fact, my mother's line, descending from my grandmother, my grandparents, and my great grandparents, my mother tongue should actually be Welsh, and in fact, it's living memory that I know the story of what happened to the Welsh language in the United Kingdom, and we had elements of Welsh in our English growing up, and we knew words and we always knew certain phrases and things in Welsh, even in our English. But we didn't speak Welsh. And the reason we didn't speak Welsh is that my grandmother's parents thought it would be a disadvantage for their children to speak Welsh, because they had ideas that it would disadvantage them socially and for work, that they would move to England and not need Welsh because Welsh wasn't spoken as widely in England. That if they were to speak Welsh, that the idea would be that their English would suffer and they wouldn't speak English as well, because they would be splitting their languages. And all of these things, sadly, we still hear today. They've not gone away. These misconceptions about speaking more than one language are still with us, and I've heard them from people actually in positions of power within communities, whether that's teachers or even doctors, and people who base these ideas and opinions not on actual research and what the evidence actually shows, but on sometimes erroneous research that has since been debunked, since been cast out as nonsense from more valid scientific argument and research. And we see it today, in many countries where we think that it's a disadvantage. Particularly, some languages are seen as more valuable. Some languages are seen as better for being able to get a job or to access certain ideas, education, work, and just to be seen in in a good way. And unfortunately, that's just been the way for a long time. Raimundo, tell me, Richard, how do you deal to find a neutral, similar accent when learning a language relative? Okay, I'll get into that. I'll just finish my sort of conversation on this, and I'll come into some of the questions that you've got. I can see coming in. So, accent. Actually, it's interesting that you mention accent and dialect. So, even with Welsh, I mean, my original English is a dialect of English. It's not standard English. My native mother language is not just standard English as I speak now with you today. It's actually Scouse. And unfortunately, even dialects and accents are seen as a lower form, and people have preconceptions, misconceptions about what it means to speak in a certain way. So even that, to that degree, my accent has shifted, because at school we had, when I was very young, we had elocution lessons, and elocution lessons were there to teach us to speak English in a very specific way. So, we had to pronounce clearly all of the sounds of the language. And okay, I still have northern vowels in English. So just to give you an example, in southern English, this is a glass, and for me it's glass. So that still remains, and that's still fairly acceptable for most people in the United Kingdom, that I can have those northern vowels, but my pronunciation is fairly standard for a northern pronunciation. Whereas when I was younger, I spoke with a very strong Scouse accent. That's the accent from Liverpool, and that was the dialect I used too. So I've actually had to correct that because of societal norms, and to be able to be taken seriously in certain places. And this happens with dialects, it happens with accents, and it happens with languages across the world. And I'd love to hear or read your comments about how it's affected you and how you felt, and what this day means to you, that you can actually celebrate your uniqueness, your linguistic heritage. And for me, that means, and has meant, being able to go back to Welsh and learn it even later in life, because it feels like it's a part of me that wasn't given naturally because of what happened historically. And it's something that many Welsh people have fought for, to get access to do what they live their lives through the medium of their mother tongue. And this is something that's happened over the decades, and it's fairly recent. I mean, there are very famous student protests that took place in Wales in the 1970s to fight for the rights to be able to have media in Welsh, to be able to do basic things like write a check in Welsh, to be able to get services through the medium of Welsh. And I'm pleased to say that many of these things in the United Kingdom have come to pass, and that we have had the opportunity to get access to things in Welsh now. When I was living in London many years ago, in fact, I used this to my advantage because I'd learnt Welsh. I could actually have my phone installed in my flat through the medium of Welsh much more quickly than I could in English, because fewer people were calling to do this in Welsh. So there are actually some technical advantages as well to speaking the mother language sometimes. But on a serious note, though, it's super important that we acknowledge that all languages are equal. Yes, I mean, we'd be silly not to recognize that some jobs are more likely for certain languages because of economic power, because buying power of clients, customers, infrastructures of certain countries. So for me, German has always been a very big language for me in terms of being able to get jobs and to use my skills. And so I've always had to use German. So of course there is that kind of thing. But in terms of what it does cognitively, what it means to go back to your roots, what it means to reconnect with your history, and for many of us, you're not too distant history. It's never too late to go back and reconnect with that, and it's super important to do so, because I think it it makes us feel that we don't lose that heritage. And this is something that, as somebody from an indigenous language and part from the United Kingdom, losing that Welsh heritage in that way through language, particularly because language is the vehicle of culture more often than not. And there is something quite special about going back and learning that. And we see in indigenous cultures around the world that this is something that can often be neglected because it's not seen as economically advantageous. And often within our communities, we often think in the same way as my great grandparents thought, that why would you want to know that language of the past when the modern way of doing things now is moving towards a language like English? Could you can change this language, English for Spanish, for German, for French, for whatever language you want that's seen as this bigger, more powerful language. It could be speaking Mandarin instead of speaking another language. There's no reason why we can't speak both. And indeed, speaking both helps us to have the advantage of being able to communicate with a bigger audience of people. But it also means that we do stay connected to where we're from and who we are, and we can add that diversity, which is so valuable to the wider world. And this is why I think that a day like today is super important. For me, it's also been a journey of discovery. So over the past year or so, I've been looking at other languages that are sort of minority or indigenous languages around the world, and feeling that desire to connect more with them than just with these big, perceived big economic, powerful languages. And for me, that's been taking me on a journey of getting into Maori, of learning about North Sami, and now more recently learning about languages from the Isles, where I come from, and getting into Gaelic and getting into Cornish, and looking at Manx, and even hopefully getting into Irish too, more as I move forward. And I feel that the connection to these languages, these native languages of my home islands, just gives me a better understanding of the history and diversity of where I'm from. And I feel that as well with more people across the world. When you start to get into a new territory or a new place, you start to discover and unpick this rich tapestry of language, of peoples, and of cultures, and how they merge, and how they mix together, and how perceptions are different, and how history and how things that happen are perceived and seen through different and new eyes. And this is one of the things that I've learned over many years of learning languages, is that you can learn history through books and you can learn about from your point of view. And often we're told how history was. And it's interesting when you go and you learn history through the eyes of a different group of people, through their language and through their cultural context and through what they see as the truth. History always has at least two sides, often 3, 4, 5, or even more. And it's extremely telling when you look at history in that way and through those new eyes and new perspectives, that you really get and gain this deep appreciation for actually things are not nowhere near as black and white as we imagine. And perceptions and being told who you are and what you speak, to the point that today we still have people who are told that their languages are and their cultures are not as worthy as another, and that's never true. As long as people are together and grouped together, and we understand that we all deserve the same respect and acknowledgement for our own unique traditions, and that's our cultures, our histories, and also our languages. So I hope that you all get to celebrate your own languages and your own traditions and your own linguistic heritages from your own backgrounds today, and that you get to remind everyone of your existence and why you're valuable and why you count and why you matter, because you do. We all do. So I hope just starting the video talking about this and starting the live today just helps to remind everyone of that and why today is important. And I hope you'll join us as well on the 27th of March when we look at, we celebrate the day of multilingualism. And so not just one language, but all of the languages we speak. And that, as somebody who's learned different languages and made a new language, I've made it my home language of Macedonian, why that diversity is also important too. And yeah, I hope you'll join. So thank you all so much for coming and all of your comments. Wow. I'm going to do my best to go through and read them and answer your questions now too. So I'm so grateful that Facebook is working today, which is amazing. It's the first time in many weeks that we've been able to be live on Facebook too. So I can see there are lots and lots of questions coming in. So I'm going to go through as best I can, as quickly as I can, to get up to date with everything. I like your saying that you're grateful and thankful for your languages. So Abdul, you're grateful for the beautiful Arabic language. Yes, and indeed, Arabic is such a diverse language in terms of, from standard Arabic, Quranic Arabic, and all the way through all the dialects, which sometimes could be even seen as languages, especially when you talk about the Maghrebi Arabic, right? So much diversity there in Arabic. I know what you mean. Yeah, one a banana man. I saw that comment as I was talking, and I'm glad you wrote it, because it was nice to see that you had that sentiment too of sometimes what we've missed and what we've lost over the years, and hopefully we can keep getting that kind of thing back, and we can work together and help support communities to keep their languages and to help them thrive once again. Okay. I'm seeing here, so a question here from Damanmol. You say, tell me, Richard, how is it you deal with a neutral or similar accent when you are learning a relative language from the same family? It happens to me with French since I'm Spanish native. I'm not quite sure what you mean in terms of dealing with an accent. Tend to go if I don't have a sort of a natural connection to a country, I'll often go with the standard pronunciation. Sometimes I do. I do go with a certain country, but it, like with Spanish, for example, for me it was definitely Andaluz that was the one that stuck most, but it was it's modern sort of just standard Spanish, Castilian Spanish that I started with. My teacher was from Madrid. With French, it was a similar thing. It was standard French, and it's been pretty standard for me, except for when I went to Canada and I gave learning Quebecois a go. If you want to come back and tell me if I missed the point of what your question, I'm not sure I entirely got it. Hello to everyone joining, by the way. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for stopping by and for your questions as well. Wow, I see lots and lots of people arriving. Okay. Let me see if I can get back to the next question here. Okay. Wow. Okay, I'm doing my best to go through and find all the questions that I can see. There are so many comments, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting the right questions and not just conversation. So do bear with me while I look through. Any thoughts on language learning apps like Busu? So language apps like Busu would be like, I guess, Duolingo and things like that. They can, I guess, they can be fun to get the gist of a bit of a language. Sometimes they can be a little bit irrelevant in terms of the types of vocabulary and things they teach you. I don't personally use Busu or Duolingo. I think I've used some Memrise. They have more real life videos and things on there of people speaking in a more natural way. So if you're looking at an app similar to those, probably Memrise might be a bit better, I think. Otherwise, I mean, they're good for getting people into learning languages, but as for serious language learning and serious materials, I think Link is probably my favorite, just because you can import your own stuff, and you can do quite a lot with Link, but it's maybe not as pretty. I've heard people say they don't find it as pretty and as sort of intuitive maybe as some other apps, but if you can get past that, what the app actually does is I think pretty solid. And then I've been enjoying using Closemaster recently, because they you can put your own sentences in, and also they have some languages that there's not much for, so I've used that a little bit for practicing languages. In terms of language apps that give you words and phrases as well, there are some like that, like uTalk, that have quite different languages, especially on a day like today. It's probably worth mentioning uTalk for some of the really unusual language choices that they have to learn the basics of some languages. It's more like travel phrases and words than, say, for example, where I would recommend Link for learning things in context and being able to put in lots and lots of different things. Okay, Richard, do you think talking different than our parents might end up losing that language? Even the accent, dialects? Absolutely. So English, so for example, my family doesn't speak in the same way I do now. But my daughter speaks more like me, as I'm speaking now, because that's the English she's learned from me. I didn't speak to her in Scouse. And I guess I didn't do it consciously, because first of all, I haven't spoken Scouse fluently to people for a long time anyway, but also because she goes to school where it's international English, and it needs to be as neutral as possible for the second language speakers to be able to understand it accurately. Well, thank you very much, Mule. I really appreciate you donating €5. That, wow, thank you. It's very kind. Oh, it's really kind of you to say that. I'm inspirational. I really appreciate it. I'll get a cookie. I will get a cookie. Thank you. That's very sweet. Yeah, so I do. I think that sadly that diversity sometimes can be lost. And I feel, I mean, my daughter's not growing up in the UK, so it's not the same as sort of if she were being raised in the UK, she'd probably pick up dialect as well from different people. So the same way as you don't speak like your parents, I think also it's true that some people do move to areas and their children end up speaking the local dialect and their parents don't. So possibly it evens out overall. There are always going to be people who move into areas and out of areas, and so yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and even as a as a non-native speaker of Macedonian, it's interesting that sometimes people can tell the region of Macedonia where my family's from, where my Macedonian family's from. They can hear it sometimes in the way I speak. So it's interesting, even as a non-native speaker, how you can pick up on these things. And my wife certainly, when she speaks English, you can hear that she's learnt it from my family because she'll use things that my mum would say, and it's quite fun to hear that. And I quite like that we have that exchange. So it's quite a mixed bag, really. Um, What's the difference between dialects and accents? That's a good question. So I could speak to you in standard English and with a Scouse accent. So if we were going to talk to you in a Scouse accent now and just talk like that normally with the same grammar that I use in English, in standard English, that's basically how it would sound. It wouldn't be any different to the type of vocabulary and grammar that I choose to use in English normally. But if we were going to use Scouse dialect, then I would add in certain things like I wouldn't say my language. I'd probably say something like me language, me instead of my. Um, if we were talking about my brother, I'd say our brother or our mum, our mam, and we use our a lot more for my, being more inclusive in that kind of way. Another thing that you'd notice in Scouse dialect that's different to standard English would be I seen him yesterday. So I seen him would be I saw him yesterday. There's no saw in Scouse dialect. It's I seen, and we don't say I have seen him. You say I seen him. So there are differences between dialect and accent. There are also dialectal words as well that we'd use. For example, the word for an entry or a passage in Scouse is a jigger. And then there are many other words that we use in sort of in Liverpool and the area around Liverpool that are different. And so you see this, and then the question then becomes, when does a dialect then become a language? Well, that's a process over time and evolution of a language, of a dialect or languages. They just grow apart and change. And you see that happen with language families. There just comes a time where a group of people split off speaking a different way, and then they agree that actually now they're so different that it's actually a language. I find that question quite interesting, and I think it's not a purely linguistic question. I believe this is an anthropological question. When a group of people develops to a degree that they feel disconnected from the original. And I heard somebody speaking quite recently, actually, it was last year, about the case of Luxembourg and Luxembourgish, because Luxembourgish being made an official language of Luxembourg is quite a recent act. It was, I don't think they ever saw the need to make themselves known as a different language group in the same way as, I don't know, Swedish and Norwegian, which happened much earlier. Luxembourgish and German are equally as different and have been for many years. But the reason that happened, as I understand it, was when Germany tried to assert its dominance over Luxembourg and say, actually, will you speak German? And that's when Luxembourgers had this sort of awareness of this awakening of, actually, no, we don't. We speak Luxembourgish, and it's interesting that happened in Luxembourg. And from my own personal perception, I see Swiss German or the there's very different Swiss Germans. There's not just one Swiss German, there's Swiss Germans. The Swiss German languages, as far as I see, are very different. But in Switzerland, there hasn't been that awakening of a consciousness of Swiss German being a different language. But if you go to Germany and you see Swiss German or hear Swiss German spoken on TV, they need subtitles to understand what they're saying. They can't, you cannot follow Swiss German. And in fact, many German speakers in Germany perceive a Swiss accent as being Swiss German, and it's not. They're just speaking, for them, Hochdeutsch, High German, but with a Swiss accent. And it's actually, I find really interesting when a language community decides it's a language and when they are happy just calling themselves a dialect of a language. It's really interesting. Harry, if you can speak a language fluently, what jobs and careers can you get from this? Many. I mean, languages really cross every single thing that we do in life because it's the one thing that unites us as human beings. We use them to communicate with many different people and across many jobs. So lots of different things. So with my languages, I've worked in the IT sector, I've worked in diplomacy, I've worked in social media management, I consult in languages. So you can do many things. And then there are more typical things that people do: teaching, translation, interpreting. But you can also use your languages to help you in other roles. So people who become doctors to go and work in hospitals in different countries, people who work in, actually, accountancy, strangely enough, is a branch that you often find they want people who speak more than one language. So learning accountancy can help with that. People sometimes use law, where they go and they work in different parts of the world as well, and they have law degrees. But you can really, languages mix with pretty much everything. I mean, if in science communities, in almost every industry, if you speak languages, it's a benefit and it can help to enrich your career. So there's not one answer to that. They can be used for many different things. Lo único que sobre mi familia, aparte de ser colombiano, son abuelos alemanes indígenas nativos. Sí, eso sí que se puede aprender también varios idiomas así, aprendiendo de la historia de nuestra familia, ¿no? Así que, y a veces son de varios países, también de varias culturas. Y es una cosa que se puede hacer durante toda la vida para mejorar los conocimientos de nuestra familia. Let me see. Ciao, hello everyone. So, okay. Can I speak Persian? Not very much, not very well, unfortunately. Maybe one time. One day I'll speak it well. Who knows? I'm learning Italian. I'm thinking of adding second language Japanese or Mandarin. Have you learned any two languages at the same time? Yes, it's possible. You divide your time when you add another language because you can only spend so much time on a language. So just be aware of that and see how it goes. But yes, it's possible. Mandarin and Japanese, I would possibly advise against doing at the same time, just because you come across the same characters, and they've got a very different pronunciation in Japanese and Chinese. So I would say probably maybe wait. The advice I hear from most of my friends that have learned these languages well is to learn the Chinese traditional characters first and then move on. If you're interested in moving on to Japanese and simplified characters, it's a lot easier. So that's the advice that I always hear given, and I would probably just pass that on from their knowledge. I did simplified characters, and then I did some Japanese, but I found it very difficult to not read the Japanese characters as in a Chinese way. It was super difficult. So I'd see them, and in my exam at university, I had to read a passage in Japanese for the exam, for the oral exam, and I got to the kanji, and it was okay on the hiragana katakana, but on the kanji, the desire to read it out in Chinese was super difficult. It's really hard to resist. I managed it and I passed the exam, but it was very difficult. What do you think about the knowledge being lost with language death? I cried while watching a video to preserve endangered languages. Yeah, it's extremely sad. It's sad when actually a world vision or a sort of a historical viewpoint is lost as well. I mean, I find that actually quite sad because, as I say, language is the vehicle of a culture, and its history and its ideas and its thoughts, and yeah, I think it is extremely sad. I'm glad you use Memorize as well. That's cool. Es posible estudiar 3 idiomas con diferente nivel en cada uno. Sí, es posible. Yo estudiaba en universidad, estudiaba 4 idiomas a la vez, porque mi carrera es de idiomas combinados. Así que tenía que escoger 3 idiomas y luego podía hacer otro idioma también a la vez. Y yo escogí también portugués, así que he estudiado 4 idiomas a la vez. Y funcionaba bastante bien, pero estaba muy dedicado a mis idiomas y no tenía trabajo, ni familia, ni nada, porque era estudiante en la universidad y tenía mucho tiempo para practicarlos todos y para estudiar mucho. Y sí que funcionaba y también seguía también el curso de sueco e islandés y incluso con 6 idiomas. Funcionaba. Pero depende de tu día, depende también de lo que tienes que hacer durante el día. Y si tienes tiempo para hacerlo, sí que funciona, pero depende también mucho de los idiomas y del contexto. Por ejemplo, si son idiomas muy parecidos, a veces sí que confunde bastante, pero sí que se puede. Yeah, I see some of the comments now on the scouts coming through. Las personas que parlent une langue. Ok, ok. Penses-tu que les personnes qui parlent plus vite une langue, apprenant plus vite une langue, oui, c'est possible hein, que avant, sachant déjà une langue, ça t'aide vraiment à capter un peu mieux comment apprendre une autre. Et ça, ouais, ça va aider bien sûr, mais c'est juste une question de pratiquer. Et c'était ça pour moi, en fait, avec le français. Moi, je parlais français avant d'apprendre l'espagnol. Et le français m'a beaucoup aidé à apprendre beaucoup plus vite hein, l'espagnol parce que j'avais déjà beaucoup de mots de la langue française qui sont des mots presque pareils qu'en espagnol. Que par exemple, pour moi, comme anglophone, j'aurais dû apprendre beaucoup mieux. Bon, étudier beaucoup mieux, je veux dire, le vocabulaire, mais oui, c'est sûr. Et aussi avec les verbes, avec l'idée de subjonctif, par exemple, pour moi, c'était plus facile avec le français, parce que je l'avais déjà appris en français. Ça, c'est clair. C'est la même chose avec le suédois pour apprendre l'allemand après. Ça m'a beaucoup aidé à apprendre mieux et plus vite l'allemand. Cela. Okay, I'm going to see if I think I've got through most of these questions here. Let me turn my attention to the other questions that I have. I know that there are lots of them, and I'm sorry that it takes me a while to go through them all. I love seeing... do I speak Bangla? No, I don't, unfortunately, not yet. Hopefully at some stage I will learn Bangla. Okay, I see a question about... Let me see. Merhaba. Cheers. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I've missed a lot of these hellos, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Okay. How is my Hangul? Actually, I had a couple of stalls with some of the Korean study because I had things that were going on and I had to take a week off, and I've had another week of crazy. So it's been a little bit difficult getting back into it, but I am getting back into it, and I'm enjoying it very much. Actually, I have my lessons and I stick to those, and yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be writing all about this and making videos about it so that you see that, like you, I also have days where it gets difficult to study, and I also have I have to work through tough times and tough periods in language study. It's not all serene waters as people may think. It can be difficult. So yeah. Peter Balash, hey, nice to see you. Saluton. Che fartas bone, esperevole. Okay, what do I think about the potential for Esperanto for the future as a tool to protect all mother languages of all people in the world? If everyone would be bilingual from childhood, it would be easy, and this could help many people become polyglots. Yeah. So, Peter, I think that obviously, I like all languages, including Esperanto. And okay, so in real terms, the idea of learning Esperanto and having Esperanto plus your other language or other languages, I think, is an honorable endeavor and idea. In real terms, just the way English is at the moment, I think English is going to be difficult to surpass. And I say that because I think English has taken that role. Unfortunately, what English sometimes does is it actually it disrupts the other languages. I don't know if I see nowadays a balancing out of that. So I'll give you an example. In Skopje, so it used to be a situation many generations ago where people would speak 4 or 5 languages, and they speak all of the neighbors' languages. So they'd speak Serbian, they'd speak Turkish, Albanian, Macedonian, maybe they speak Vlach, maybe they speak Romani. They'd speak all these different languages, right? And they'd learn bits of each other's languages. They would be neighbors and they would learn each other's. What we're seeing now is people are not learning their neighbors' languages as much. They're learning English and then they have their own language, and then they may learn another language in addition to that. And that's kind of been a trend across many countries in Europe, that people are using English as this lingua franca and then having their own languages in their own communities. I don't know how I feel about that as a native English speaker myself, and somebody who's very passionate about languages, particularly endangered and vulnerable and indigenous languages. It makes me feel slightly uneasy because I don't really fancy speaking English to everyone. But at the same time, often the biggest advocates for English are nowadays people who have learned it as a second language and people who have adopted English as their national language in addition to another language. And I don't know how easy it would be in real terms to replace that with Esperanto, just because of the sheer numbers of people who have done that already. Although I agree that I agree absolutely that a language without this sort of politics and history of English would be preferable for me as a native speaker. That said, I have found that English, unlike many other world languages like French or Spanish, it's interesting to see how many nations have taken it and it's become this apolitical language, which is, for me, absolutely bizarre the way it was spread. But it does seem to have mutated, especially in African countries. That surprises me. In India particularly, it really surprises me how English has become less political than Hindi, given its history in the region. In Singapore, how English has become Singlish and they've made it their own. I love that we have an Indian English standard, and this is an interesting thing with English, is that it's been changed and whereas I think some other languages like French, unfortunately, haven't enjoyed that same apolitical status English has. So these are all many reasons why I think English, unfortunately, is and probably will continue to dominate as that apolitical language that's the vehicle between understanding between cultures. And with the advent of apps like TikTok, where English is by far, one of the most popular languages on it. As soon as a country with a smaller population, like North Macedonia, like Bulgaria, like name many countries in Europe, you run out of videos in that language very quickly, and straight away it goes into English. And even TikTokers in other countries will use English as a standard language to make videos and talk to people. So that is also speeding up the uptake of English, that kind of thing. And you see very young generations now in the Balkans who speak English at a phenomenal level, compared to, say, children even older than, I'd say, the generation from about mid-teens, say 13, 14, maybe up to 15 and younger. The level of English now can be absolutely outstanding. I mean, it's almost it's almost unbelievable how well some people speak English in the Balkans compared to how, like 10 years ago, there's almost no comparison in level and ability. So people who are now kind of these late teens, 20s, they had already quite a fairly good level of English, but compared to the younger generation, they completely blow them out of the water in terms of their ability to communicate. And what you find is these language communities that I said before, they would learn each other's languages. Now they're using English, which is, as I say, extremely strange for me to see. Especially when I speak local languages and I like to use them. But yeah, it's kind of what we're seeing. So thank you for the question, Peter. I think it's a really good one, and I will carry on speaking Esperanto as much as I can whenever I can. Have I ever thought of acting on Coronation Street? That's hilarious. No. Would I go down well on Coronation Street, you think? Let me see if I can catch up on some of the questions here on YouTube. How are you? Early? Okay. How early should a language learner try to speak with a native speaker? Is there such a thing as too early? No, there isn't such a thing as too early. You can continually learn and speak with people. Absolutely. Thank you for the comments on my accent. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Welsh is beautiful. It is, absolutely. And to all those people from South Wales, I speak. That's where my Welsh is from the north. That's where my family's from. My family's originally from Carnarvon. Oh, wow. Gershon. Nice to see you. Well, thank you for writing. It's nice to see some Gaelic on there, John. I spoke only English until I was 28, 29. I've learned Irish myself, and my wife are raising our daughter almost 2 years 2 years old in Irish. Excellent, John. That's really, really good. I'm really pleased to see that. It is a brilliant feeling. I'm very pleased to see you doing that. Well done. Learning your indigenous language is important for strengthening the connections to one's heritage. Languages, windows to different culture. Absolutely, completely agree. Do you think there will be a polyglot conference in North Wales in the near future? Craig, I would love to have probably a language event would happen more likely in the Isles again. We had a language event in Edinburgh a year ago, almost to the day. It was the end of February last year, and it was a lot of fun. I'd love to go back to the Isles and celebrate more of our languages. I think we've got some really great linguistic history that needs to be celebrated more, including Welsh. This year's all about Manx because it's the year of the Manx language. So yeah, let me see. What can I say? Tamigiri. I don't know how to say organize a conference. I want to. Tamigiri is I want to in Manx. Tammy Ski. I'm tired. I'm too tired. My Manx isn't coming out. Muchas gracias, amigo, por tu canal. De nada, Mauricio, de nada. Estoy en proceso de aprendizaje de inglés. Admiro mucho tu trabajo. Gracias. Bendiciones a ti también. Muchas gracias. What are your languages that you have at C1, C2 level? Silvera, I don't know. I really don't know. I have 5 home languages, which are English, French, Spanish, German, Macedonian, and I've worked through a number of other languages for many years. It's very difficult to say. This idea of C1, C2 actually came way after I did my studies of languages at university. So I've not sat any C1 or C2 exams. I've done a B1 exam in Turkish, and I've seen some B2 material, and I speak a number of languages beyond that easily. So yeah, I mean, the languages I did at university are going to be beyond a B2, but I honestly don't know how many of them. I don't really mind anymore. I just like learning languages. Student from Dhaka University, students from my university organized a protest for mother language in 1952. They sacrificed their lives for the constitutional recognition of mother tongue. That is nature enthusiast. I'm really, it was a huge sacrifice to make, giving your life in protest to be able to have your native language. And yeah, it is definitely the history of this day is rests in Bangladesh, and that recognition for the efforts to have mother language recognized, extremely important, and we'll be grateful to those people for that and their families. Здравей, Ричард. Има ли падежи в турския? Има падежи, само да не е така как на руския. За мен това е аглутинация на езика и за това не е същото, само да е приближно така. Падежи са как в формата на описуване на граматиката на езика, само да не е това така как аз мисля на руски, например, ако има смисъл за теб. Колко? Аз мисля, че има 6 падежи, как се казва от граматически аспект на глеждане на езика. Само да не е това как мислиш на руският, например. Това е много различно и аз научих да говори и турски език тук в Скопие. Това е много по-едноставно, например, как беше за мен за руският. Аз научих руски да говоря. Това беше много по-сложно за мен да научим много добре с падежите. С това, защото много регуларно няма изключи си как, например, на руски или нещо така. И това е само да даваш нещо на думата или да. Само така. What's the most difficult sound in Albanian, in your opinion? For your answer, okay. In Albanian, difficult sound? I don't think there is really a particularly difficult sound. They have the and the th that we have in English, the th. And so I guess for many people, that's a difficult sound to produce. But for me, not really as an English and Welsh. Well, we have them in Welsh and we have them in English, those sounds. So that's not too difficult for us, but they are difficult for many people, I guess. The soft l sound might be difficult, I guess, as well. So luan is playing. Luai, I play. But yeah, maybe those three, possibly. What's the language you love with all your heart? That's a nice question. So me, it would be probably German is one of my favorite languages, but I love my home language of Macedonian. I like it. I like it a lot because obviously it's a nice mix of many languages and have a lot of Turkish words, and I like that it's accepted so many words from different languages. I like that about it, and it stayed like that. It's not been cleansed in the same way as other languages in the area, and that's quite nice. But I like the other languages of the Balkans, actually. It's, I guess, maybe a little bit controversial to say that for many people in the Balkan region, but I think Bulgarian's nice, and I actually like Serbian and Croatian and Bosnian. I like those variants. I like the way they joke, and I like Albanian. I like Turkish, and I like Greek. All of the countries that all sort of have fights with each other, and I like all of their languages. But I would really love to speak Romani better. I think the Romani language and the people here are just some of the smiliest, happiest people that I see, and they always make me smile and they always make me laugh. And yeah, I'd love to speak Romani better. I would, yeah. It's hard to choose which one you'd get good at because there are so many Romani languages actually spoken just in this small area here. It's quite difficult, but I would love to. Yeah, and all of the smaller languages as well, languages that people don't hear of, like a Romanian or Vlach. There are many, and yeah. So yeah, good question. I like so many of them. Okay. Okay, let me see. Wow, there are so many questions here and I haven't seen them all, so sorry. How do you rate your Mandarin listening? Any tips to improve Chinese comprehension? Yeah, a lot of a lot of practice, listening to lots of things. My Mandarin at its height was probably around like a B1 level, maybe. It was, yeah. I mean, I did it at university for a couple of years in Sweden, and it was okay. But yeah, I mean, now I can follow it to a degree, probably still to around an A2 B1 level maybe. Uh, but yeah, I used to have to listen to a lot of things for class. Okay, let me see. Dzień dobry, Piotr. Let's see. That's a very relevant one. Okay. Can you read literary Welsh too, or can you only speak it? I've not really studied much of the sort of the older sort of written Welsh. I can read certain things, yeah, in Welsh, but I used it in speech a lot. I spoke it. The city where I grew up was around Chester, so you actually hear Welsh as a spoken language quite a lot, and the way people speak and the way people write is quite different. Thanks for addressing the yeah. Thank you, Carlos. Nice to see you. You're welcome. Let me see. Thank you for your family. Your family from Llangollen. Okay, wow. Okay. Llangollen is actually really, really pretty. If anyone gets to go there, it's a really nice place. They have a nice railway in Llangollen. You lost your mother language too, Alphonse. Okay. From Low Saxon, Niedersächsisch. Okay, Plattdeutsch. And understood Standard Dutch. Yeah. It's sad when you know that about your family, that they lost the language. There's kind of almost a grief about it. It's quite a strange feeling, and I've met people who have felt real grief not speaking their parents' language and having to learn it later. It's like a real strange feeling about it. Okay, you say that in Irish too. Yeah, the Manx is. Yeah, I think it's similar in all of the Dialect languages, is that you see it a similar way. So there's quite a few things that I see in Irish now and I see in Manx that I know from my Gaelic studies. Wow. Since in Deutschland. Okay. Snackplatt, Eclair dat nu. I love it. I love that you're learning that. That's cool. Do you manage to watch? No, I haven't seen that. Let me see. My mother language is almost extinct. I grew up speaking Cockney rhyming slang, and no one speaks it in London. Look after yourself, my old China. Oh, great. Oh, yeah. I love it. I love it. Yeah, you have to look after it, your native dialect and language. Ah, okay. I love that you're writing in Scots as well. Discord for Spraak. Yeah, it's good to get out Discord and get on and create channels, create media in these languages, keep them alive, keep them vibrant, help other people learn them. Absolutely. Unfortunately, I have to go because I'm going to lose time now on Instagram. It will finish, but I will speak to you all next week. I'm going to read through the comments that I've not read through and try and get back to you soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much, and have a great Mother Language Day.